Life in exile challenges each new generation of Tibetans to maintain their identity and to treasure their traditions. Whether it's an elderly man painstakingly carving a mantra in stone, or monks and nuns reciting that same mantra as they turn prayer wheels. Dharamsala is a sanctuary, but it cannot be a true home. Tenzin Lodro Chogyal is on the front lines of Tibet's struggle to survive. A nephew of the Dalai Lama, he went to college in the United States, but after a few years felt the need to come home to Dharamsala, India. Have you ever been to Tibet?
Never been to Tibet.
That must create some conflicts in your mind, that you're Tibetan, but you've never been there.
Since I was born in exile here in India and have been brought up in a Tibetan community, there's always this longing to go see Tibet. But then if a person like me would want to go to Tibet, I would have to go as an overseas Chinese. And I know that I'm not a Chinese. So for the very reason that we came into exile, I do not want to go see Tibet as an overseas Chinese.
Chogyal's father is the Dalai Lama's youngest brother. Both of his parents fled Tibet as young children. Did you grow up with their stories? Did they recount how they came through the Himalayas to get away?
Oh yes. My generation of Tibetans in exile, we've heard these stories so many times. And we often kind of think to ourselves, although, we won't be faced with such physical hardship, but mentally we'll have to be ready to face similar challenges.
For the Dalai Lama's generation, the price of freedom was exile. For the next generation of Tibetans born in exile, freedom comes with a new set of challenges. What happens when His Holiness, the present Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, passes? Will there be another Dalai Lama?
Well, His Holiness always says that whether there will be a next Dalai Lama or not depends on what the Tibetan people want.
Well, that begs the question, can there be a Tibetan culture that lasts, that survives, without a Dalai Lama?
That again, I hate to sound like this, but I really feel that depends on the Tibetan people again. If we do not pay attention or value our own culture and put in the investment of time to study it, to reason with it, and then to pass it on to the next generation, then there's real danger of Tibetan culture not being there, because the greatest disadvantage we have is that we do not have a geographic location where we can establish that culture. No Tibetan likes to be a refugee, to not have a country of their own.
It didn't occur to me that you would think of yourself as a refugee. Do you think of yourself as a refugee?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes. People like me, our generation, wherever they're born outside Tibet, we don't know the taste of political freedom. We know human freedom. We all know that. But the biggest difference between you and me is you have political freedom as an American. But me as a Tibetan, I have never known political freedom.
The Dalai Lama cannot grant political freedom to his followers, but one of the gifts of his life in exile is the freedom to practice his religion without fear. It is in Tibetan Buddhism that he says he finds the strength to continue his campaign for a free Tibet. You have said if you meditate, if you bring a warm-heartedness, a desire for peace, nonviolence, those things, that you will be happier. But my question is, does it work when you are facing an overwhelming power such as China?
Now here, I think, as an issue, the meditation on compassion not necessarily direct effect. The issue is we have to work. The action is more important than meditation. However, on individual level, the meditation on compassion is very, very helpful to keep one's own peace of mind. Then the issue itself, of course, will not solve through prayer, through meditation of compassion. Will not solve. We have to act, we have to work.
Working for Tibet, saving it, is the Dalai Lama's life's work. He accepts invitations to speak and to teach in dozens of countries every year. He is, in many ways, the only Tibet the world really knows.
His Holiness Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama.
Receiving an honorary degree at Smith College in Massachusetts this year, the Dalai Lama was a picture of joy as Tibetan refugees crowded in to see him. But the exiles are a reminder that Tibet's story is still a tragedy.
This ancient nation with unique cultural heritage and also beautiful sort of environment, that nation now passing through darkest period in our, I think, almost more than 2,000 years.
The Dalai Lama tells his audiences to hold fast despite the Chinese government's refusal to allow complete freedom of religion inside Tibet. It's an impasse that Professor Robert Barnett of Columbia University believes continues because the Chinese leadership does not trust the Dalai Lama.
The Dalai Lama did welcome the Chinese in the 1950s for part of the time, not always, but he did decide to try and become friendly with Mao Zedong. And he did, after the uprising in 1959 that failed against the Chinese, he did very much change his tune and said that they had no right to be there. And he did for some time say he wanted independence, and then in 1978 he gave up the idea of independence.
Barnett says China's deep distrust of the Dalai Lama's motives grew stronger this summer when a new kind of protest emerged in Tibet.
What happened August the 1st, the anniversary of the founding of the People's Liberation Army, is that one Tibetan, an educated, respected older man, walked up onto the stage in front of officials, quite unprecedented, and gave a speech in which he asked people whether or not they wanted the Dalai Lama to return.
Photographs provided to the International Campaign for Tibet show the festival in eastern Tibet's Lithang province and the Chinese military police response after 53-year-old Rangay Idok was arrested.
This is a new kind of protest. All other protests have mainly been people taking a gamble, running in the street and hoping maybe to get away after a few seconds of shouting out a slogan. This is a different kind of bravery. This is somebody calmly walking up there and saying what they think.
Human rights groups say Idok is still in prison. Barnett says these harsh responses will only make the Dalai Lama more determined to work out a peaceful solution.
I think that the Dalai Lama may have a point that the Chinese could gain hugely if they work with him and reduce the threat of a restive Tibet. I think that's a possible benefit for China. But it's very difficult because they don't trust the Dalai Lama, and China is terrified of Tibet triggering unrest in other areas.
From your perspective, what's happening now with China and Tibet?
Well, this is my personal position, not the position of the Tibetan government or His Holiness. I feel China is buying time by pretending to negotiate with the Tibetans, and they feel that the Dalai Lama or His Holiness Dalai Lama is the problem. And I think this is the biggest mistake they're making. because if there is to be a solution to the Tibetan problem,